Yes, good evening. And I'd like to start to welcome our guests out in TV land to the first of 10 series here that we will be having here on the public access stations called Bridge the Corporate Gap. And to start this evening show off, I'm your host, Terrence Abdullah, and my guest is Robert Griffin. And my other guest here is Sharon Williams, a local director of job training. I want to start the conversation off about, get a little background and get a little feedback, but the main emphasis of our show this evening is how to bridge the corporate gap between minorities here in Silicon Valley and the corporate America structure, which is represented here in Silicon Valley. So if I can get a little background information about you, Dr. Griffin.
Certainly. I was born in California. I'm not certain how much information you want. I'm 65 years old. Retired in 2008 from De Anza College, where I was the vice president for 15 years. Have 39 years of public service, and am an avid supporter of education as a way of changing people's lives. I've seen proof of it in a number of occasions, and so I am absolutely committed to the concept if you want to change things, you've got to educate people out of cycles or educate people into cycles.
Thank you very much. Sharon Williams.
Okay, I'm a native-born Californian as well.
Us.
Two of us, right. So I was born in San Francisco, raised here in the Bay Area. Went to school in Stockton at University of the Pacific, and I've been at Job Train for almost 38 years. Before that, I taught high school. I taught some special education in elementary school, and I also did a little stint in corporate America. So I too am a believer in opportunity for people. I feel that potential is there in just about every human being, and what we need to do is find a way to unlock it and to convince people that they can succeed, and then that they will.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to kind of hit the ground rolling. It's been my understanding and my strong observation through some research I've done preparing these segments, these will be hosted here on the public access station, is I looked at 3 demographics, and those 3 demographics was African American, Hispanic, and the Pacific Islander, and how they are pretty much underrepresented. I was at Google today, and I seen an array of employees there, and I just walked around the campus and really got a, really got myself acclimated with the campus. I went at lunchtime and I was looking, and I thought, as I was getting ready to prepare for the show, the rainbow effect. And I've always felt that a rainbow should be 1/4 or 25% of a whole. And I did not see that. And as I went to some other places, I just wanted to understand here at some of these other companies in Silicon Valley, the reason why I mentioned Google, because it's a wonderful campus, and I happened to be there today at lunch. It's a really wonderful campus. But it was absolutely, I did not see the level of diversity, which is really, I would feel, representative of the true dynamics of Silicon Valley. And the reason why I want to bring this question up, because you're both are educators, you've trained and have been an educator, but I want to just tell me what is some of the things that really lacks in parallel as in far as motivation and gaining access. And either one of you guys can jump in and answer that question. It's an open question. So whoever wants to take it first.
So you're asking how can we know? Well, I'll take a stab at it first if you don't mind. Ladies first. Okay.
Absolutely.
Deal. Okay.
Sometimes.
Yeah, what you saw today is typical of what's actually happening in the technology companies in the Valley. That Hispanics, African Americans, and Pacific Islanders are very lower. The population is underrepresented in these companies, especially in the higher level jobs. So there might be somebody from those ethnic groups who are doing the gardening and the cleaning, but they're not usually in the corporate offices. It's really a shame when you think about it. I know that Google's an interesting place for you to have gone today, because about a year ago there was a series in the Mercury News that people were protesting at Google because they were saying, why won't you show us your statistics about minority employment? And they refused. And so did many other companies in the Valley refuse to share those statistics. They've actually gone, the minority representation in high-tech companies in Silicon Valley from 2000 to now has gotten worse and worse and worse. You'd think it would have improved, but it has actually gone in the opposite direction. So I don't think it's such a matter of, they use H-1B visas and things like that, but it's not such an issue of not being motivated to get into companies. That I could talk forever, but I'm going to stop. But we really need to take a look at K through 12 education, right. Getting children, minority children, interested in science, interested in something that can lead to engineering careers and high-level careers in the Valley. And I want to say a little bit more about what the value I think that has for companies, but I want to give you a chance to say something first.
I understand that Google, from your observation, didn't have a level of diversity that you thought was appropriate. Where have you seen a level of diversity that you thought was appropriate? Because I don't know that I've seen it any place in the Valley or in any number of places I've gone. I think it's just, in fact, there are people who have been shut out of the job market for a very long time. And it goes back to your comment about the K through 12 education. I think that people have been undereducated for a long time, and there are a number of variables and factors that have led to that. And you can blame parents, you can blame schools, you can blame students, you can blame all kinds of people. But in fact, the outcome, from my perspective, is that you don't have people who are qualified for a position, and you also don't have people who have the confidence to apply themselves to those positions. I think early on people get told that they don't have certain skills in math and science and those kinds of things, and they begin to believe it. And they're not encouraged to do it, so I think those people are educated out of those kinds of positions. And then if you look at the dropout rate for a lot of Black, Brown, and Pacific Islanders, it's a very high dropout rate.
Absolutely.
And what frustrates me is that it's not seen as a crisis. I mean, if when we hear that there's a 50% dropout rate of a certain population, if it's Black or if it's Brown, it's like, okay, we know that. it's a crisis. I mean, it's an insult and it's a crisis, is that public education would allow that many people to fail. I don't understand it. I mean, there are a number of factors that I think lots of, if you say research, lots of data written on why and the circumstance and those kinds of things. But I think it's bigger than just who's employing people. I mean, that's an outcome as opposed to an input. The beginning is, how is it we begin to change the entire structure so that we've got people who have choices. They may not want to work for a high-tech firm, but in fact we want to increase, as you said, their opportunity and their ability to be able to apply for technical positions, doctors, nurses, and other kinds of things.
Well, I'm going to bridge on that a little bit. We can all lump and say, you know, it's education, we need to start here at the home. But my feeling has always been those are very relevant and been very pertinent comments and statements have been made. But when I look, just to talk about, when I traveled to Florida recently and had the opportunity to speak at the Daytona Community College, at that time in October, I believe it was, of last year, I seen and it was found out that it had the highest dropout rate of black males, the second highest, excuse me, in the country. Then I come back to California, and just a couple years ago, the Pacific Islanders were listed on the national census as others. And then you would look at the, you know, African Americans, white, Hispanics, what I really focus on, that these three groups, excuse me, have a tendency to live in enclaves of lower economical, depressed communities. They used to live around each other. So to bridge the gap to corporate America, I don't see, even if for those who have go out of their community to get an education, like they go to De Anza, West Valley, and other various community colleges around the peninsula, but they do not seem to get the readiness of opportunities even once those harness the skills. And with a program such as yours, a few years ago, you had a program, A+, and had a son, and Cisco, and all things that you were actually had a partnership and a joint venture program, and a lot of those still got left behind. My hope is to bridge the gap, is to understand, in essence, is there a lack of motivation? Is it going on the back of what you're saying? Is it short of education, they're not qualified, and those who have the education and the qualifications in these three demographic groups, what about access? Because access historically have been denied people of color. That's, you know, of the record. But once you have the skill set, how do you transition in? Is it that we fail to sell ourselves? Do we fail to market ourselves in the interview process? And both of you guys have been in a position of authority and have hired. So I want to really touch on, in the hiring process with these three demographics over the years, what do you felt that we might have missed, bridging on that you're saying the lack of qualifications? You want to go again, since you're the lady?
I don't know. First of all, I don't think that lack of motivation is the heart of the problem.
I agree.
I also don't feel that it's an unsolvable problem. I have a great example in the community that I serve. Is a wonderful school, Eastside Prep. It starts in the 6th grade. I just went to their graduation last weekend. I was their 11th high school graduation. Every single graduate from that school has gone directly to a 4-year college. And the speaker at the graduation was a graduate of MIT, who had also graduated from Eastside Prep and was an East Palo Alto kid. So it can be done. It takes some imagination, and I think from the corporate side, usually corporations are so smart at figuring out, you know, what's going to make them make more money, what's going to help them make more money, and you know that a more diverse workforce is going to bring more ideas to the table. You know, they're going to be more thoughts going around, and they're going to be more innovative because they have a diverse workforce. And also for marketing, if you're going to market to different populations, if you've got that diverse workforce represented in your company, you'll do better in those areas. So it is perplexing that we don't have, and I think it goes back to education again, and feelings of their own capacities, their own capabilities. But I think that companies would benefit so much if they diversified their workforces more. And there is a disconnect somewhere. It can be done. It isn't being done, though.
Thank you very much. You want to chime in now?
Yeah, I do. You know, I get really frustrated with programmatic solutions to problems. And that's what, in essence, we talk about programs, and what we learn is that their programs will take people who traditionally have not done well, and they'll do wonderful, and they'll go on to do excellent things. We don't have a systematic solution. We have a system of education, and we have programs within a system that do well, which says that the people are not unable to learn. They have all kinds of competency and abilities, but they do better in a program format. Well, you're talking about paying attention to the person. If you were extrapolating that out and say, okay, how do we turn that program into a system and have the same level of accountability and expectations of outcome? I don't believe that there is an expectation of success for people of color, men of color in particular. I just think that people are over-conditioned by all kinds of gangster stuff and stupid things that they see and hear, some of it perpetuated by the communities that we talk about, black and brown and Pacific Island communities. Some of them are the big perpetuators of it. So but to go back to your comment about employment, hiring, in hiring, you hire based on the applicants. Who's in the pool? You can't go beyond the pool. Now, you can recruit and absolutely increase your pool to the degree that you can by making sure you're getting to targeted audiences and they understand that it's available and that your hiring process is fair and they're going to be given an equal opportunity to apply for the position and be considered for the position, because that's really important. I know that I've heard some people say, why should I if I'm not going to be considered for the position? And they kind of take themselves out of the consideration for the position because they don't think that it's equitable in terms of the hiring process. We can teach people how to apply, how to interview and do those kinds of things. That can be done. But you've got to get people prepared to apply. You've got to give them the skills. And if you've got a very small number of people who are applying, they can't fill all the positions. And you're not going to see this incredible increase in numbers unless you put more people in the cycle. And that putting more people in the cycle is the educational aspect of it. I think that we have to educate people into the cycle by gender and by ethnicity.
I always believe that, to go on to the fellow on that point, desire. I don't see, and actually, that's actually something when I walk down the halls of your program, and I've walked down the halls of several other programs, desire. And I know that you cannot legislate desire. When I walk down the campus of your old school, desire. I don't see the desire. And then my mind say, well, if they don't have the desire, systematically, that's why they read it out of the system. But
I disagree with you so much.
I do too.
I don't know how you could possibly measure desire by looking at someone and make the assumption that they don't desire. They're there. They could be any place else. They're there. And so they have a choice. In our environments, it is a choice to be there. It's not by law, K through 12 law. Higher education, it is a choice to be there. That is a desire as far as I'm concerned. So I disagree with you that there is a lack of desire.
Well, when I say a lack of desire, let me clear that up. When I said a lack of desire, your body can be somewhere, but you can still be out to lunch. You can be, and I say that a little differently because Bill Gates, in his first, he was out to lunch and he seen out that his destiny was not to be at Harvard, and he left, and he did quite well for himself. So I mean, the same with the young man, Mark Zuckerberg, who started Facebook. So you can be somewhere and attending the class, but your desire is somewhere else. I'm saying that it seems to me, with the class that I've had the chance to sit into, and I see the absence of occasionally desire. It was a class, matter of fact, called for scholars, I think that it was, I spoke at the Sankofa Scholarship Program. Great program, but I felt that in the midst of sitting in on the couple class, that it was some things far as desire, and they didn't connect with the leadership of whether they were going to want to lead their lives to the next level.
Sure.
And I understand that you just spoke to them, and I want to get your feedback. They tell me you did really great, by the way.
Thank you. Once again, I'm not understanding the issue of desire. You know, part of it, I think, is a responsibility of the educational system and us as educators. When someone comes through your door, they don't have to know what they want to do. A number of people don't know, and that's absolutely okay. And a number of people change their minds several times in that process because they think that they want to do a thing, but in reality, it takes more or it takes less or something else happens to them and they change their mind. So I think that what we have to do is we have to help them cultivate their interests, have to help them develop their career goals, have to help them develop themselves as individuals in order to apply themselves. And I think that becomes part of our role as educators, and I'm assuming the same thing is true for your occupation.
Absolutely.
And so, it's a matter, if you're there at the door, what do we owe you by the fact that you've shown up and you've taken the time to enroll, to pay us, and you're attending classes? What do we owe you? I think we owe those people, every student that's in the class, we owe them quite a bit. You know, we shouldn't make assumptions about their capacity, their ability. What we have to do is we have to work with them to the degree possible, and some of them help them understand, because they may not come, if you're a first-generation college student, for any number of reasons, you may not understand the opportunities. You may not understand a lot of the culture of higher education. So we have to help get them to the place where they understand it, and they can operate within it, and then they can benefit from being there.
And from the whole concept of generational, this is a generational problem. You know, it goes, and many of the people we're talking about who are in school, who are getting ready to maybe launch a career, don't have role models in their family and their communities to motivate them, to have them say, oh, I want to be just like my dad, or I want to be just like my uncle or my grandfather. With that lacking, they have to find that someplace else. And I think that that's one of the things that our program can provide. I'm sure that De Anza also does provide that. I'm going to talk for a minute about our culinary arts class, because it's one of those classes where people can catch on fire with a desire to be a chef. And it's one of those industries where people can actually go up the ladder without a lot of formal education. As long as they learn the skills for that particular trade and they have a passion for it, they can succeed. But we bring people in like Chef Jeff Henderson, who was a drug dealer in San Diego, you know, went to prison and fell in love with the kitchen when he was in prison, and came out and had a dream. And he dreamed that he would be the executive chef at Bellagio's. And when he got that job, he had achieved a dream, and he thought, I have to go give back to other people. I have to be a role model. And he comes by our school. He stops into our kitchen and talks to our students and cooks side by side with them. And that does a tremendous amount for their inspiration. It does something for their self-confidence. They feel important. They feel that somebody who really made it cares about them. And that makes a big difference.
I'm going to give you two examples. As you were talking, I just thought about it. I was talking to a young Latina woman. She's going to CSU Monterey Bay, and she's a social work major. And I asked her, had she considered going to get her MSW? She had no idea what that meant. And then when I asked her what she wanted to do, what she said she wanted to do was not ambitious. And so I talked with her a bit about MSW, explained to her what it was, and suggested she check into it. And I was surprised that no one had done that. Right. And so I think that the expectation of what she could do, she's there, and I mean, people ought to be encouraging her to go on to do more. And the second part is that I was talking to a young woman who is graduating high school, and she wants to go to college. And I asked her, what does she want to do? She said, I want to be an event planner. And I thought, okay, that's okay, but what else have you thought about? You know, and I wonder if that's a safety thing for that person, because it's a very bright young person, and I think with a lot more capacity. And so we talked about perhaps she might want to go get her general education courses out of the way. And hopefully in that time she'll discover intellectual aspect about ourselves and something else and maybe want to do more than. And it's not that event planning is bad, but I just think that sometimes people take the safe road, you know, because they don't have people encouraging, they don't have systems that are suggesting to them that they can do more or pushing them harder to push themselves. So I think maybe what you're looking at as desire might be people who simply have not had anyone pushing them, encouraging them, and motivating them.
And also I think that so often young children are guided to dream about very traditional careers, you know, the old-fashioned careers. And I don't remember the statistics, but I've heard outlandish statistics about the jobs for the kids who are in elementary school now, the percentage of them that don't even exist today, that they'll have the opportunity to get into brand new careers that we can't, well, my 8-year-old grandson can outmaneuver me on a computer. You know, I will admit that. He can fix things I can't fix. He can push the right buttons because he just seems like he's wired different. And this new generation is going to have opportunities that we never dreamed of. So I think it's important to keep their minds open and not have them just think, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be I'm going to be a teacher, I'm going to be a nurse, right? I think that it's important for them to think, wow, there's a big world out there. There's a lot that's going to be, you know, that I could get interested in and go for.
I just want to fall back because I don't want you to lose the thought you had something to say about corporate America. But I wanted to see in relationships as it pertains to networking, cultivating relationships in the workplace. And you guys both been on hiring. What out of those three demographics that we're discussing tonight, what have been some of the shortcomings that we have seen from a entry-level job that you might have been overseeing to even a higher skill job that seems to weed us out by our own volition coming to the table? What are we failing to have coming to the table?
No more than any other group of people has coming to the table. I don't think that there is any kind of ethnicity shortcoming on the part of a person who's an employee. I think that you have employees that underperform, you have employees that need assistance, you have employees that need training, and so I don't think that there's any more or less. Now you might find people, given circumstances, and it's also not necessarily limited by ethnicity or gender, who have anger and frustration because of some life experiences, or have lack of trust based on life experience. I've encountered some people who just simply, you know, they're very defensive, don't trust, and it's very difficult to get them to get through that, and they sometimes are their own worst enemy because of that.
One of the things that we do at Job Train is that our whole staff gets trained periodically in something called Bridges Out of Poverty. And the concept is that when somebody has lived in poverty and then is going to make that big bridge to the employment world, which is middle class, that they have to, it's a big bridge, it's a cultural bridge that they have to cross. Not just having skills, not just all of a sudden having a paycheck and your own apartment, but there are lots of hidden rules in the middle class that somebody who's grown up in poverty doesn't know about. And so what you were referring to, I think, happens. They get over there, you know, I got the job, but how do you keep that job? How do you go up the ladder if you don't know the rules? And so often somebody can have, you know, create a problem for themselves completely innocently by acting in a way that would have been okay in the culture in which he or she grew up. So it's important for us, I think, to show those rules, to have, and I know that statistically, they say the people who make it, who really succeed, almost always have someone on the other side, you know, reaching out a hand and really showing them around in this new culture. They have to speak differently, they have to act differently. I'll give you one example that an employer called me and said, I hate to tell you this, I'm going to fire one of your people that graduated from your program. And I said, why? You know, thank you for letting me know what happened. And he said, you know, she was a good worker, but she borrowed money from everybody from all of her coworkers. She didn't know she was doing anything wrong, you know, but it alienated her, and she no longer fit into the work group. So we have to teach those things so that they know the rules.
Can I respond to the comment about speaking and acting differently? For a number of people, especially I've heard this a lot with African American men, they call it selling out, you know, because they feel like they're not able to hold on to their own language, their own culture, their own behavior. And so they feel like if they go into this white world, that if they have to act that way. For some of them, now that is when you talk about a shortcoming. For some of them, that's a little bit myopic in my mind in terms of, but it depends on the environment. But you know, there are some that just feel like, you know, I don't want to do that. I don't want to give up my language. I don't want to give up my, as if they have
my
to.
culture.
And as if they have to. And also as if speaking articulately is not being 100% black, 100% brown. And I remind them frequently, young men, about a number of people, Malcolm X, who spoke very articulately, and I don't know that anyone that says he wasn't a 100% black man. So try to get them out of the cycles, because sometimes their perceptions of what's real and what the expectations are not real.
I'm going to feed on that. But what would you say about self-esteem?
Go ahead.
You want me to?
Mine or hers?
No, I mean,
It's open again.
Right. Well, self-esteem is such a complex issue. I don't know what side of it you want me to talk about, but it certainly, somebody who doesn't have self-esteem because they consider themselves a failure will usually continue to repeat the pattern of failing. And so I think that if there's something that we give people at Job Train, it's respect and high expectations. And so once somebody realizes that others really do think that they have the capacity to succeed and really believe that they can do it, I think that their self-esteem starts rising. And with every success, real success, not false ones, not, oh, you're always doing a good job, patting on the back, but really acknowledging success and acknowledging progress helps somebody build self-esteem. Once the self-esteem is there, then the barriers, I think, go away, because then they think, oh, wow, I'm pretty smart. I could do this. I could probably do that too. And I could probably do this also. And they can start setting higher goals for themselves and achieving them.
I agree with Sharon. And I'd also think that it depends on the environment. You could take a person who might have low self-esteem in one environment, put them in another, and they have excellent self-esteem.
Oh, absolutely.
Put them in a church environment, no problem. Put them in an environment in the community, no problem. Put them in a work environment which is not, where there are people who don't reflect their culture, their interests. They may appear to have a low self-esteem in that environment. And so I wouldn't say that that person has low self-esteem 100%. I mean, there are some people who clearly have that, but I'd suggest that it is exactly what you said, is that what is it that you do to make them feel welcome, encouraged, and supported in that work environment, that then they'll be outgoing. And because they might be protecting themselves from making mistakes. If I make a mistake, you know, I might suffer some repercussions, and so therefore I'm not going to take risk. And so what, you know, the lack of risk-taking might be seen as a lack of self-esteem. And so I think they have to be encouraged to take risks. They have to be understand that they won't be punished unnecessarily, more so than anyone else in the company or in the business or in the workplace.
Right.
So I think the self-esteem issue is certainly an important issue, but you know, I want to make sure that it's not an assumption that the person has low self-esteem in all environments. Is that in the work environment? Yeah.
Preparation. Again, back to the 3 demographic groups. If you haven't seen that they bring African American, Pacific Islanders, or Hispanics bring less to the table than any other groups, then while the numbers are reflecting that they're not bringing enough to get the hire, and is there proper preparation? If you make the cut from high school to college, be it via JC, university, or state college, and you go through particular programs and you get certifications and training and things like that, to really make the cut to an administrative level. And I've noticed in education, a lot of administrators who look like you and myself come to deal with out of the service industries. They're not heavy on the academic side, like vice president of instructions or things like that. They come out of service.
I disagree 150% with you.
We're going to get back to that. And then I've noticed that a lot of social programs, your counterparts, not a lot of the better ones, I don't see are headed by Caucasians, and a lot of fabulous women like yourself that I hope to have on my show, and as well, and then the other flip side, they would be minority women at the helm, but they don't seem to be Hispanic males or Pacific Islanders or African Americans. So since you disagree with me, go ahead.
Well, your comment about them coming out of the service side, and what you meant by that, I'm assuming, is that they come from the student services, student affairs side as opposed to the teaching side. And that's not necessarily true at all. I mean, I think if you look broadly, you'll see a number of people who come from the teaching side. And so it's not that they don't teach, but they're in the service side. Now, if you go back a ways, it was probably more discriminatory in terms of where people of color and women could go in a higher education structure. And so you would find that fewer of them were by gender, in business, because the assumption was that men were the business people in higher education structures. You'd find that fewer a while ago, fewer women and people of color were the lead instructional person. You know, but I can take you back historically about the whole role of the disciplinarian and all those kinds of things that happened in support services and how people got involved in that. But I wouldn't want to make any kind of assumptions about intellectual capacity, because I mean, I can point to any number of African American, Latino, Latina, and Asian presidents of colleges right now, and they come from all areas. And I think that they're demonstrating leadership on a regular basis. They're demonstrating intellectual capacity. And I don't see that there's any relationship between how you get there and when you get there. You're not going to offer anyone a job that does not have the capacity to do the work. If you become a vice president, it doesn't matter if you come through support services or what. If you become a president, it doesn't matter if you came through business, support service, or instruction. You have the capacity to do the work. And so there's an awareness of your intellectual capacity and your leadership skills. So I don't see that one way or the other is any less effective than the other.
Well, when I say that, it tends to lead itself by observation that they come more from less out of classroom academia than out of like counseling and those. That was my point and my question to you.
Again, I could point to any number of people, and they come from teaching, and you know they have taught, and they may do other things, but I taught a graduate course at Santa Clara University for 6 years. Okay, and I was in support services.
Go ahead.
No,
thank you.
Go ahead with what?
your view of that, because I don't see in Silicon Valley how many counterparts that run a program equivalent to your size that come from a Pacific Islander, Hispanic, or African American. That are not women.
Should I disagree with them too? I think I should. A general principle, if nothing else. Yeah, there are most definitely Hispanic and African Americans and Pacific Islanders who run programs. Very frequently, those programs are related to their ethnicity. You look at Mama D with the Pacific Islanders. You know, she has her own program. You look at Ron Gonzalez with the Hispanic Foundation. You look at, there are people who are running these organizations. So, actually, in my organization, until I got the job, they were all African American males who held the executive director's position. I was a fluke. I was only supposed to last a hot minute, but I just stuck it out. But I don't think.
And how long you've been there now?
Oh, almost 38 years.
As the executive director?
No, I've only been the executive director since 1979.
That's long enough.
But I maybe people aren't as colorblind as I think they are. But I've learned that many people are colorblind when they get into the kind of work that I'm doing, because people become so focused on the success of their clients, of their students, of that it doesn't matter. I honestly sometimes have to stop and think when someone will ask me, what does she look like? And I'll say, and race isn't the first thing that pops into my head. So I think that there definitely are leaders out there in the nonprofit world who are ethnic minorities.
Including the president of this country.
Right.
That's another
That's one of the. I read an article not long ago. Why don't more people look like our president in corporate America? I mean, there's only one woman right now who's the CEO of a large Silicon Valley tech company. There's just a dearth of
well, I know American Express CEO Kenneth Chenault is an African American.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you're, and you talk about role models, if we just took a list of some of the top 100 companies that are led, and some of the top Fortune 500 companies, and we took them out of Fortune magazine, and we took some out of Black Enterprise magazines, we're going to be hard pressed to find those who you would say came out of the inner city, like what you're talking about, to have those good role models. And stay with me here, because I say that in the confines that of the hip hop generation, as they like to label people. So if you go back to, I'm 43, so if you go back to the generation prior to me, and then yours and Dr. Griffin's generation, that's more traditional America. And those people who are at these key positions in these companies tend to lend themselves coming out of your generation, maybe 10 years younger than your generation.
Yeah, they're younger than we are now.
But I mean, they're within shooting range of your age group. How does the new young standard professional bridge that gap? Coming out of the inner city, he's really thinking out of the box. He's come out of a hip hop culture, and he wants to make the break, but his way of marketing himself and brandishing who he is different. Not that it can't be as lucrative, but it's different to make it in the structure, which I happen to see today here at Google.
Well, when I walk across a college campus and I hear music being played, I don't know that I can associate hip-hop with any particular race or gender, because it could be a blonde kid listening to some of the blackest music that anybody can listen to, with his pants sagging down around his butt and his ankles. So when you say hip-hop generation, I think that there are a number of people who are I'll call it victims of that, because I think it's an atrocity. But I are victims of that, in terms of that whole prison image of pants falling down to the belt and everything else, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, so you know, but so the hip hop, I think that's impacting a lot of people's lives. There is this new generation of people, and I think what they expect out of this life, what they expect they have to do. They're not going to work hard as people my age in terms of being at a job forever. They don't feel the same sense of commitment and obligation to a job. I think that there's a greater sense of entitlement. And so, but I think that that's across the ages. I recall listening to an XY generation conversation in terms of a lecture on that, in terms of what the expectations are. And I thought it was pretty right on, having a child for me in both of those generations, a 38-year-old son and a 24-year-old daughter in that generations. I could see it. So I think it's broader than just by race. But what also happens is, on top of that, there is race, okay? And so now you've got this person that has that Y generation kind of mentality, and now they have the race too. And the reality is yes, there is institutional, organizational discrimination, 100%. And they know that. Yes, you can go to college, you can get a degree. Are you going to go get that wonderful job? Maybe not. It could be that you've got all your ducks lined up in a row, and you go apply for that job, and you're going to bump up against discrimination. It's not going to be overt, but it's going to be discriminatory, and you're going to know it. And so, yes, that is true. I mean, And so I think that you asked a question earlier, and in the hiring process, one of the things that I pride myself on is that I could be assured that the hiring process was fair to women and people of color. And it was going to take that in consideration. It wasn't going to, there'd be no biases from my perspective, and I would make sure that the process didn't reflect any biases. And so I don't know that that's always true in a lot of work environments. And so yes, you can become a victim of that. And yes, you go to school, you do the right thing, you make all the right efforts, and you go apply for the job, and you could find yourself confronted with that kind of organizational, institutional discrimination.
Now, you just said something that triggered a thought for me, and that is that that image, the negative image, the pants down around mid-thigh and bebopping around, became a problem at my program. So we should just rack our brains about it. So what do? We have a dress code. We tell them you can't dress that way. Then they're turned off. Then they're going to lose the opportunity. Then they'll be resentful. Then So what do we do? And what we did was put together a uniform for every class so that they could feel, so the biggest offenders in that were the project build, the construction students. And
wonder why.
So they wear overalls now. They wear carpenter's overalls to class every day, and they feel good about it.
Excellent.
Because they're associating that with what they're going to become next. And the nursing students wear smocks, and it really does make a difference. And it was I thought, a positive approach rather than punishing them or saying you're going to get kicked out of school if you wear those pants down there, to come up with another solution. And I feel that a lot of times that is the way to help people make changes. If they can make changes feeling good about what they're doing, looking at the positive rather than the negative aspects of their behaviors.
Both of you guys had the opportunity. I know that Deanne's used to have, I believe, a gala, night of the gala, like of a fundraising.
It's called Night of Magic. Yes.
Excuse me, Night of Magic. And I know that you just came off a Breakfast of
Champions
fundraising. How does, when you're looking to sponsor and attract sponsors and engage in sponsors, people of color, of the demographics we're talking about this evening, seem to have a great challenge with that, a great challenge to connect. You're probably one of the most, when I had the opportunity to see close, one of the most successful, male or female, cross-gender lines, successful at getting some real money, large sums of money, and you've been around it for quite some time. How is that gap can be bridged? Because you don't see corporate America writing checks or having a spokesperson of color being this pitch person, and with the exception of Michael Jordan or some athlete, to really chime in and be their guy or their girl, so to speak, and do that.
I work a lot with nonprofits. And currently I'm on a nonprofit board, and we have a problem with getting sponsorship money. But what we find is that that's true for a number of nonprofits right now. And so certain nonprofits, if you're on the opera board, you might have a better chance of getting people who are going to sponsor you and give you large donations. But for a lot of other nonprofits, that's not the case. But I think that your question has to do with that African American person being up front, representing the organization with the money. There was a gentleman recently. He was representing AT&T, who had some responsibility. He was visible. I can't think of Leon's last name, but anyway, he was visible. But I don't know that matters, because Leon didn't have the authority to make the decision about the money, and so regardless of who was up front, it was the corporate that made the decisions about the money. The nonprofit I'm on used to get funding from Comcast and Southwest, and they simply are not doing that right now. A lot of the companies are pulling in their sponsorship dollars, and so the path that we're taking now is looking for lesser amounts of monies from more companies and more individuals, as opposed to large amount of monies from larger organizations. I was involved with the, I was in Monterey. I was the president of United Way, the Monterey Peninsula. When I came here, I was on the United Way Advisory Board for Santa Clara County. And this valley is a very poor giving valley compared to a lot of places with all the money that's here.
You go to the Midwest,
yeah,
they give.
and Seattle and
East,
other places,
they
yeah.
give.
And so for whatever reason, it could be that there are young people who have come by their money quickly and haven't developed a sense of community obligation and commitment. And so, you know, they're not as willing to give as others. And so I think that the issue is not who's out front. It is what's the philosophy of the organization. Do they feel a commitment to the community, and are they willing to contribute to the community? And I don't see that as often as I'd like in this valley.
Just to bridge on that, as last word, I've always said, to replace you or someone like you at an organization like you had to be, and I think you might remember this, you had to be, if you were going to be someone of color, you had to be either a Condoleezza Rice or a Willie Brown, because there's nobody that I can think in this Silicon Valley that could attract and hold up an organization like you have and get those kind of dollars that you got. I mean, and those two people really came into my mind, and I'm leaning more towards Willie, but I understand, but nevertheless.
I'll ask him if he wants my job. Yeah.
But what's your thoughts on that? That, you know, you really have to be someone really dynamic. It sounds
like
to do it.
you're making it sound like I'm more successful than I am in reality getting those dollars, and it is getting harder. It is getting much harder. Another point I want to make, I don't know who's going to end up taking my place if that's when I leave. But something that we're focusing on now is trying to attract the next generation, because the people who are giving us most of our money are quite a bit older than the general population. So, and they have that philanthropic heart beating inside of them. But the younger generation is going to have to step in and pick up the slack as these, you know, older donors start dropping off the face of the earth, and it's a sad thing, but it has to happen. So that's a very conscious direction that our organization is moving, is to try to pull in the younger philanthropists.
Well, I want to thank you. Thank you, Dr. Griffin, for coming out to speak with us. Perhaps we can have you back at another time as the series goes on. And I'd like to thank you, Mrs. Williams, for coming out as well.
It's been my pleasure.
And I would actually extend to you now in the future, so when we will have when the director of Nova or Project, Build would come on, we could bring you back, because y'all have 3 of the real cornerstone programs here in Silicon Valley at Talk at a Time.
Oh, I'm only coming back if he's with me. I have a new friend.
But if we can fit enough chairs around, we can bring him back as well. But
thank you,
I really want to continue these discussions, look for some of the answers, maybe in the program develop some solutions on how someone of color can kind of break through the ceiling. But if you guys had any last thoughts, this is now the time to say it before we get ready to close.
Sure.
Well, there is a ceiling. I think that we have to acknowledge that. I don't have the magic answer to how to break through it, but I think that acknowledging it, and also I think that the companies need to be forthright about what the ethnic mix is and their workforces, so that we really know how big the problem is and what it is, so that we can begin. You know, you can't really expect to solve the problem until you can identify it.
Good people do bad things, and the ceiling is discrimination, and I think we have to call it for what it is. And because your organization may behave in a way that appears to be discriminatory, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. So I think we have to get people to understand is that you're probably a good person, you're doing all the right things in your community, you're going to church, you're doing everything else, but your practices of your organization could use some attention, because that's what creates the ceiling. A ceiling isn't just something arbitrary. I mean, it's a behavior, and the behavior is discrimination, and we have to put it on the table for what it is.
Exactly.
I just need a little clarity on that. When you say you could be a part of an organization, I would, if I was of a head of a major corporate like Larry Ellison, I would like to think that if my organization was discriminatory, I could fix that.
If you are aware of it or conscious of it. It could be that you operate within your own world, and your world is not an inclusive world. I mean, it is inclusive, and you're a good person. You're doing all the right things. But your world does not engage low-income people, people of color, people that are living in difficult environments, and so you're simply oblivious to it. And your practices within your company might reflect who you are and your values. And so you got good people doing bad things.
Well, once again, TD studio audience and out there in the TV land, I'd like to thank you again for listening in and watching our show. And we will be having several more shows of series like this, Bridging the Corporate Gap, and they will be shown on other community access stations throughout the Bay Area, from as far as Saratoga, as far as Hayward and Alameda County. So please watch out for Bridge the Corporate Gap as we look to come into your homes again and on the internet. And we're always doing it live, so we're always asking for any participation that we can get from you out there in studio land. Thank you very much, and we would hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Terrence.
Thank you, Terrence. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.